Today, the Honor 5X launches in Europe, just days after its arrival in the United States, so it's a great time to revisit this phone and see just how it stacks up from a new perspective. First, the basics. The Honor 5X will sell for £189 in the UK, and for that money you're getting a surprising amount of phone. A 5.5-inch 1080p display, a metal body, and the same kind of really great fingerprint security we've seen in other Huawei phones. Overall, it's fantastic value, especially compared to phones that usually occupy this kind of price point. But there are a few compromises involved in packing all this hardware together and selling it at such a low price, and yes, being a Huawei phone, there are some software quirks that you'll have to deal with. Regardless, on the outside, the Honor 5X is a good-looking phone. It shares quite a bit of design DNA with its older sibling, the Honor 7, taking this design language and remixing it into a more affordable product. It doesn't quite feel as substantial or premium in the hand. That's mainly to do with the polished coating that's used, which feels a bit slick compared to the exposed metal of the Honor 7. The slight curve to the back does help with ergonomics though, and the 5.5-inch screen size is big enough without feeling gigantic. Speaking of the screen, it's great to see a Full HD panel being used in such an inexpensive phone, and the display has more than just pixel density going for it. Colours are rich and vibrant with no weird oversaturation, and it's clear enough to see in direct sunlight even without the brightness boosting feature turned on. The biggest trade-off of the screen has to do with a fairly common feature that's bizarrely missing from the Honor 5X. This thing has no oleophobic coating at all. That's the fancy name for the smudge-resistant layer that just about all smartphones have on their screens. Without it, the 5X screen gets gumped up with fingerprints really easily, and given how good this screen looks, that's a real shame. The phone does come with a pre-fitted screen protector, but that also doesn't have any kind of oleophobic layer. It's probably the biggest mark against the 5X, and a reason to consider rivals like the Moto X Play that won't attract grease and oil as easily. On the inside, there's a Snapdragon 616 processor running the show. That's an octa-core chip, and basically a slight revision of the Snapdragon 615, which we've seen in a bunch of other phones this year, with mixed results when it comes to performance. And mixed is probably how we describe the 5X speed and responsiveness as well. It's not really slow across the board, but it is prone to occasional slowdowns that you won't find in phones like the Honor 7, which use Huawei's own Kirin chipset. Besides that, there's an ample 2GB of RAM, which is just fine for a phone like this, and 16GB of storage backed up by a microSD slot. It's also a dual SIM phone, and unlike other Huawei devices, you don't have to choose between using a second SIM and being able to use the SD card slot because each one has its own dedicated slot. Huawei's also gone some way towards fixing up its EMUI software, which has traditionally been kind of a mixed bag, with questionable design patterns and some stuff that's just plain broken. There's less of that in the case of the 5X, but you still need to look far to find common sources of irritation, like the constant nags about apps using power in the background. Aside from that, the feature set's actually pretty good, with the 5X inheriting the Honor 7's fingerprint sensor shortcuts like a quick swipe down to bring up the notification shade. There's also a vast library of themes, in case you're not feeling the rather colourful out-of-box UI, although none of this lets you change the highly customised way Huawei does notifications, app switching, and lock screen alerts. Underneath all that, you've got Android 5.1.1 Lollipop, which is not ideal when Marshmallow is becoming the standard for new phones, but at least the US model is being kept up to date with security patches, and we'd hope the European version follows suit. The Honor 5X also surprises with a reasonably good 13-megapixel camera around the back, backed up by the same agile camera app we've seen in other Honor phones, with a range of shooting modes for different situations and more filters than you'll ever need. There's also 1080p video and 720p slow-mo video. When it comes right down to it though, the camera actually produces some great looking images in reasonably well lit environments. The lack of OIS, which you really wouldn't expect from an entry level phone, means that things can quickly get grainy in low light. Though we found the Honor 5X is at least as capable as other mid-rangers from the likes of Motorola. The 5X also pleasantly surprised us when it comes to battery life, with the 3000 mAh cell never failing to get us through a full day's use, sometimes with up to 5 hours of screen on time. Whether that's down to the phone aggressively killing stuff off in the background or just more low-level tuning, it's an impressive achievement. The Honor 5X hasn't fixed all the weird things we dislike about Huawei's software, nor is it without some questionable hardware decisions. The lack of a smudge-resistant layer on the screen is particularly baffling, but the package as a whole offers really great value, and brings some high-end features you normally wouldn't expect to see at this price level. For more on the Honor 5X, check out our full coverage on AndroidCentral.com.